why my glasses are so foggy. All right, we're recording. So first up, take a look at the bottom of 34. Bottom of 34. We talked about the hippo, right? Okay. And the question is about meaningful work. And so actually, I want us to go back to, let's start with page 14. Where Marlowe indicates right in the middle of the page, it appeared, however, I was also one of the workers with a capital, you know. And then at page 18, after he passes the overturned railway truck, it looks like the carcass of some dead animal. 4 lines down from the top of the page, I came upon more pieces of decaying machinery. A stack of rusty rails. To the left, a clump of trees made a shady spot where dark things seemed to stir feebly. I blinked. The path was steep. A horn tooted to the right, and I saw the black people run. A heavy and dull detonation shook the ground. A puff of smoke came out of the cliff, and that was all. No change appeared on the face of the rock. They were building a railway. The cliff was not in the way of anything, but this objectless blasting was all the work going on. And then on page 19, the second full paragraph on the page, I avoided a vast artificial hole somebody had been digging on the slope, the purpose of which I found it impossible to divine. It wasn't a quarry or a sand pit anyhow, it was just a hole. It might have been connected with the philanthropic desire of giving the criminals something to do. I don't know. And top of page 20, another mine on the cliff went off, followed by a slight shudder of the soil under my feet. The work was going on, the work. And this was the place where some of the helpers had withdrawn to die. And then, let's see here. Is it? Uh, 27. Well, was that it? Okay, yeah. So first, the only full paragraph on the page, I went to work the next day turning, so to speak, my back on that station. It's important to note moments where the station is referred to. What happens when you turn your back on your station? You've got a station in life. When you turn your back on your station, what are you doing? That's your role. That's your job. There's a violation of expectations that he's going to go along. I turn my back on that station. And that way only, it seemed to me, I could keep my hold on the redeeming facts of life. Still, one must look about sometimes. And then I saw this station. These men strolling aimlessly about in the sunshine of the yard. I asked myself what it all meant. They wandered here and there with their absurd long staves in their hands like a lot of faithless pilgrims bewitched inside a rotten fence. Is there any work going on there? And then on 29, 3 lines from the top of the page, however, they were all waiting. All the 16 or 20 pilgrims of them for something. And upon my word, it did not seem an uncongenial occupation from the way they took it. Though the only thing that ever came to them was disease, as far as I could see. Just waiting around doing nothing. Ain't nothing wrong with that. That doesn't look so bad. Bless you. They beguiled the time by backbiting and intriguing against each other in a foolish kind of way. There was an air of plotting about that station, but nothing came of it, of course. It was as unreal as everything else, as the philanthropic pretense of the whole concern, as their talk, as their government, as their show of work. And then, of course, our brickmaker who doesn't even make bricks. And so the question is, at the bottom of 34 to the top of 35, there's commentary about meaningful work. The brickmaker strides off. Good night. He strode off, maybe 2/3 of the way down the page on page 34. I could see he was disturbed and considerably puzzled, which made me feel more hopeful than I had been for days. It was a great comfort to turn from that chap to my influential friend, the battered, twisted, ruined tin pot steamboat. I clambered on board. She rang under my feet like an empty Huntley and Palmer's biscuit tin kicked along a gutter. She was nothing so solid in make and rather less pretty in shape, but I had expended enough hard work on her to make me love her. No influential friend would have served me better. She had given me a chance to come out a bit, to find out what I could do. No, I don't like work. I'd rather laze about and think of all the fine things that can be done. That's part of our human nature. There's an element of, I don't know, is it Bartleby? Is there a little bit of Bartleby the Scrivener in here? I would prefer not to. I don't like work. No man does, certainly the speckled axe. But I like what is in the work, the chance to find yourself, your own reality for yourself, not for others, what no other man can ever know. They can only see the mere show and never can tell what it really means. And so this question is, what implications does this discussion of meaningful work have for the work to which the Africans are being subjected, the natives? And so their work is what? How do we describe the work that the native Congolese are being subjected to? And this is, I think, a big part of the problem. How do we describe that work that they're being subjected to? Mm-hmm.
Well, based on his definition of like why, in a sense, he likes work is because he likes in the work and he can find himself in it, and not for others.
Right.
But what they're making, like Congolese people do, they have no chance to find they aren't choosing to do the work and there's nothing for it in them. So they're not like mindless.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, and ultimately it's forced labor. It's slavery by another term. They're not literally enslaved, but there is no freedom of choice that they have. They are being forced. And there's, I don't think I've ever really noticed this before until this time around. There's always something new to kind of pick up and see. When he's on his however many 100-mile trek, I think it was 200 miles, and where did I write it down? There it is, page 23. The big paragraph, no use telling you much about that. Paths everywhere. Which again is an indication that when we find ourselves kind of negotiating our world, we have different paths to choose from. A stamped-in network of paths spreading over the empty land, through long grass, through burnt grass, through thickets, down and up chilly ravines, up and down stony hills ablaze with heat. Geography matters. And a solitude, nobody, not a hut. The population had cleared out a long time ago. Well, if a lot of mysterious, armed with all kinds of fearful weapons, suddenly took to traveling on the road between Deal and Gravesend, catching the yokels right and left to carry heavy loads for them, I fancy every farm and cottage thereabouts would get empty very soon. And so there are like tribal conflicts that are also going on here. And it reminds me of the kidnappings of the Boko Haram or the school abductions that have occurred in most recently, I guess, in Nigeria. Of just these the exertion of power by otherwise powerless in a lot of cases. So the natives do not have that opportunity to find meaningful work, and so that there's certainly something going on there. It's important to note that. Page 37, last line of page 37. So the whole paragraph is interesting. I've given up my worrying myself about the rivets. One's capacity for that kind of folly is more limited than you would suppose. I said hang and let things slide. I had plenty of time for meditation, and now and then I would give some thought to Kurtz. I wasn't very interested in him. No. Still, I was curious to see whether this man, who had come out equipped with moral ideas of some sort, would climb to the top after all, and how he would set about his work when there. And so the question is Marlowe's curiosity somehow related to the doctor earlier in the text? And Grace, can you clarify that question a little bit more? Because that was you.
Yes. So when Marlowe is being looked at by this doctor, he's talking about how it would be interesting to see the mental state of people who are going into this line of work. And I was just curious if Marlowe's curiosity at the end of this point is of a similar nature to that of the doctor's.
So, a speculation, possible foreshadowing, has Kurtz changed or altered in some way? And ultimately we're witnessing Marlowe's struggle, internal struggle, his mental struggle throughout. And so, that's something that we'll just have to really wait and see. But you might be able to certainly make some sort of connection there. Absolutely. Page 28, the man who was charged with causing the fire, did he die in the wilderness? And I would guess no. I would imagine that he managed to run off and escape to some degree and discover that, hey, I'm free now. I don't have to deal with these people. The way it's described, in fact, is that the wilderness without a sound took him into its bosom again. And so that sounds very peaceful. It does not sound like, anything particularly ominous. Although, then again, he is in the wilderness. Did we talk about the horse and the halter? Did we talk about that? The horse and the halter? No. Page 29. Page 29. So within the that bit where he says there was an air of plotting about that station, so the paragraph at the top of the page, nothing came of it, of course. It was as unreal as everything else, the plotting that goes on, as the philanthropic pretense of the whole concern, as their talk, as their government, as their show of work. Now, I'm going to maybe expose myself as a frustrated employee for a moment here. I was informed the Monday after spring break that I was getting a new laptop because I had volunteered for some new program. And the laptop, it's very nice. It's one of those notebooks that, flips all the way around. It's got multiple cameras and so on and so forth. So I guess it's kind of cool, but that means that their intent is to remove the actual computer unit from the rooms. And so I have to use my computer as, ultimately the computer for the screens. And so most of us travel. Most of your teachers travel, in case you weren't aware of that. And so that means I've got to unplug and replug and all this other stuff. And I asked this morning, I said, have you guys given thought to what you're going to do when subs come in the room and we need subs to log onto a computer? They're like, well, we're going to have laptops for them. I'm like, okay, yeah, that'll work. That'll be great. So the notion of it is as if sometimes my bosses are like inventing things for themselves to do. I don't know, and that frequently happens. You will find that your bosses will, kind of do that. And I'm so glad that I'm recording this, by the way. So, yeah. Anyway, the only real feeling was a desire to get appointed to a trading post where ivory was to be had so that they could earn percentages. They intrigued and slandered and hated each other only on that account, all out of jealousy. But as to effectually lifting a little finger, oh no, by heavens. They don't actually, so they plan a lot, but they don't actually do anything. By heavens, there is something, after all, in the world allowing one man to steal a horse while another must not look at a halter. Steal a horse straight out, very well, he has done it, perhaps he can ride. But there is a way of looking at a halter that would provoke the most charitable of saints into a kick. And so what is going on here? My understanding of it, and this is probably one of the more complicated passages. But my understanding is that if somebody steals a horse within the environment that he's kind of discussing, we go, oh, hey, look, good for you. You managed to steal the horse. Good job. But if we're planning on stealing the horse and just eyeballing that halter, then we start to judge the individual who's thinking about the stealing of the horse. Does that follow? Does that make sense? That we have a tendency to celebrate the crime, but not the planning of the crime? Especially if they're able to get away with it. But, yeah, not really sure. But I think, Anna, does that work for you? Would you buy that if I was selling it? Yeah? Okay. And we'll get at the other momentarily. All right. The significance of the shed burning down on page 28. I think it's the language of the description that's important. How is the fire described at the bottom of 27? I think that's our key. So what is the significance of the shed burning down? Yeah. It could be.
The sun and earth have open planets and then the fire and all that.
Right. Is that Sodom and Gomorrah aren't consumed by fire, are they? His references to the inferno, spontaneous combustion could happen at any time, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know that I recall any. There's a line in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I think it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, where somebody describes a city that's been eliminated by the wrath of God, and so yeah, I mean it's could be a fire, could be a flood, that sort of thing. I think the fire is symbolic in that way, because it's supposed to be fire. So fire is supposed to be enlightening as well, but here we're witnessing its destructive force, of the destructive force of fire and light and so on and so forth. I want to make sure that I can see this and that we can get at it all. The steering of the ship. Well, I'll come back to that in a moment. Mentions of cannibals. Is this important or symbolic, or is this just a moment where he throws in random details? The cannibals, first of all, we might ask ourselves, are they actually even cannibals? Or is there an assumption of the Europeans that most of the natives are cannibals, which is a possibility? Frequently the savage would be referred to as a cannibal. So that's part of it. But the cannibals, yes, they are significant, and we're going to take a look at why momentarily. 42, 43. Does Marlowe see Kurtz as a godlike figure? And that is a question that I'm not going to answer yet. We're going to have to wait and see on that. But certainly, Mr. Kurtz has been built up significantly, from the accountant and now the brickmaker who doesn't make bricks. And then we've got this curious conversation between the manager and his uncle, who is the leader of the El Dorado exploration expedition. On .38. So let's actually take a look at that. And there's a misunderstanding here. And so the statement is, I don't really understand Kurtz as a character. I know that he failed at achieving his purpose in life. And so that is something that, we don't know how things have ended. But I don't know why Conrad added it to the story. And so Kurtz is an important parallel to Marlowe, as I've been trying to kind of emphasize through that biblical passage, and through the work that we did with the Freslevin and Kurtz and Marlowe last time. But there's a little bit more that we get here. Oh, and some other questions too there. On 38, let's see. Manager says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, I'm as harmless as a little child, but I don't like to be dictated to. Am I the manager or am I not? I was ordered to send him there. It's incredible. So here the manager is complaining about Marlowe. And it is unpleasant, grunted the uncle. He has asked the administration to be sent there, said the other, with the idea of showing what he could do. And now they're talking about Mr. Kurtz. And I was instructed accordingly. Look at the influence that man must have. Is it not frightful? They both agreed it was frightful. Then made several bizarre remarks, still talking about Kurtz. Make rain and fine weather. One man, the council, by the nose. Who makes rain and fine weather? Who makes rain and fine weather? God, yes. Mr. Kurtz apparently is making rain and fine weather. And then dialogue, last 4 lines. The climate may do away with this difficulty for you. Is he alone there? Yes. Clear this poor devil out of the country. Don't bother sending more of that sort. I'd rather be alone than have the kind of men you can dispose of with me. It was more than a year ago. Anything since then? Ivory, lots of it. Prime sort, lots. Most annoying from him. Why would ivory be annoying? Why would ivory be annoying? Getting lots of ivory. Because of who it's coming from. Because it's coming from Mr. Kurtz. There's a desire for him to be unsuccessful. And with that invoice, and then, let's see here. He's a scoundrel. No, actually, he is not a scoundrel. Sorry. It's the that man who comes and brings the ivory, I guess. No news, strange rumors. Top of 40. The danger is in Europe, about a quarter of the way down on the page. This is Kurtz's philosophy. Almost in the middle of the page, we get double quotation marks. Kurtz's philosophy was that each station should be like a beacon on the road towards better things. A center for trade, of course, but also for humanizing, improving, instructing. And then Marlowe frightens them. And so they run away. Actually, they don't run away. There's an eerie, weird description of this. I saw him extend his short flipper of an arm for a gesture that took in the forest. And I'm wondering if we're like missing a description somewhere. That is he missing a hand or part of his arm? And we don't ever get any kind of development of that. So lots of, again, building up of Mr. Kurtz. Does Marlowe look at him as a god, and as much perhaps as everybody else looks at Marlowe? Are they steering a ship through the jungle? They're on a riverboat. There is a river. They're on the Congo. Once he fixes the boat, page 41, and it's just, all of a sudden, it was just 2 months from the day, page 41, end of the second full paragraph, it was just 2 months from the day that we left the creek, when we came to the bank below Kurtz's station. Going up that river was like traveling back to the earliest beginnings of the world. So yeah, they're on, and they're on the Congo. He never tells us what river they're on, but they are on the Congo, or maybe the river Styx. I gotta find. I don't know. The system is just not there. Page 43. Why is silence mentioned so much? And that's just one example. Why is silence mentioned so much? Does everybody have any idea why silence is mentioned so much? Hey, what's up?
Sorry, I have a student here to pick up. She qualified for nationals in debate. And I
Oh,
applied
nice.
for it. I forgot to drop it off the door.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty big deal. It was awesome.
Why is silence mentioned so much? Yep.
The only thing I can think of, which is probably not that great, but they come from London, right, where it's crazy civilized, and there's so much, there's no silence.
There is going to be noise in Europe, yeah. Okay. So that there might be something there, a little something there. Think about what silence does. What does silence make you do? How does it make you feel? How come? What happens with silence? Yeah. I mean, to think of all the times that I've asked questions and everybody's like, I had a professor who would say, okay, then we'll just sit and listen to the hum of the air conditioner until somebody says something. Silence makes you all get all up in your own head. And that is, ultimately a big part of the journey and what's going on in this moment, in this portion while they're traveling the river. So the man who talks Marlowe's ear off, the brickmaker who doesn't make bricks, is a brickmaker who doesn't make bricks. He has the attention of the manager, and Marlowe refers to him as a papier-mâché Mephistopheles, which is a devil. So who really is the man that talks Marlowe's ear off? I mean, we might associate him with the devil, or one of the many devils that we would encounter in hell. He's a hypocrite, certainly. Page 29, the painting of the woman. Who is she? The light in the darkness, manifest destiny. And ultimately, yes, I would argue that probably what Conrad may be inspired in describing that painting on page 29 was the painting of manifest destiny. That notion of civilization and savagery, the darkness compared to the light, and she's carrying a torch, and so on and so forth. Certainly, the Statue of Liberty exists at this point, not necessarily blindfolded, but there's the draped and blindfolded suggests the bringing of justice, the carrying of justice. But there's a sinister element to it. And so where is that coming from? And that's something to, just be conscious of. 31. He noticed my companion. Oh, okay. So that's the man with mustaches who says that. Bottom of 30, as Marlowe is speaking with the brickmaker, our papier-mâché Mephistopheles, the man with the mustaches who was carrying the pail that had the hole in the bottom of it comes up to them and says, "What a row the brute makes. Serve him right, transgression, punishment. Bang, pitiless, pitiless. That's the only way. This will prevent all conflagrations for the future. I was just telling the manager." He noticed my companion and became crestfallen all at once. "Not in bed yet," he said with a kind of servile heartiness. "It's so natural. Ah, danger, agitation." He vanished. There is a fear, or there's an awkwardness. This brickmaker inspires something in maybe the same way that the manager does. If you go back and take a look at page 25. Does he too inspire uneasiness in the way that the brickmaker does? Or does the brickmaker inspire uneasiness in the same way that the manager does? So that's what's happening there on that page. Okay, and I know we talked about the rivets. So on page 34, what does Marlowe do all day? He's fixing his boat. And somebody asked, and I'm guessing it's probably going to be about the cannibals, page 42 near the bottom. Oh, yes, okay. So page 42, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, 6 lines from the bottom. We had We had enlisted some of these chaps on the way for a crew. Fine fellows, cannibals in their place, when they respect their station. They were men one could work with, and I am grateful to them. And after all, they did not eat each other before my face. They brought along a provision of hippo meat, which went rotten, made the mystery of the wilderness stink in my nostrils. Whew! I can sniff it now. I had the manager on board and 3 or 4 pilgrims with their staves, all complete. Sometimes we came upon a station close by the bank, clinging to the skirts of the unknown, and the white men rushing out of a tumble-down hovel with great gestures of joy and surprise and welcome. Seemed very strange, had the appearance of being held there captive by a spell. The word ivory would ring in the air. But then, we continue, and have we gotten there yet? Yes. Page 50. He comes back to kind of thinking about the cannibals. Page 50, 4 lines from the top of the page. 5 lines from the top of the page. They had been engaged for 6 months. I don't think a single one of them had any clear idea of time, as we at the end of countless ages have. Don't forget, time is a social construct. They still belonged to the beginnings of time, had no inherited experience to teach them, as it were. And of course, as long as there was a piece of paper written over in accordance with some farcical law or other made down the river, it didn't enter anybody's head to trouble how they would live. Laws are also a social construct imposed upon the natives. Certainly they had brought with them some rotten hippo meat, which he describes that they have already thrown overboard, which couldn't have lasted very long anyway, even if the pilgrims hadn't, in the midst of a shocking hullabaloo, thrown a considerable quantity of it overboard. It looked like a high-handed proceeding, but it was really a case of legitimate self-defense. You can't breathe dead hippo, waking, sleeping, and eating, and at the same time keep your precarious grip on existence. That'll make you lose your mind. Besides that, thank you. They had given them every week 3 pieces of brass wire, each about 9 inches long, and the theory was they were to buy their provisions with that currency in riverside villages. Well, you can see how that worked. There were either no villages, or the people were hostile, or the director, who, like the rest of us fed out of tins with an occasional old he-goat thrown in, didn't want to stop the steamer for some more or less recondite reason. So unless they swallowed the wire itself or made loops of it to snare fishes with, I don't see what good their extravagant salary could be to them. So what are we getting here? What are we noticing about this? In terms of Marlowe and the native peoples and their sustenance. Is anybody bothering to make sure that they're eating? No. And Marlowe's just not even paying attention. I must say it was paid with a regularity worthy of a large and honorable trading company. Is that said with irony? For the rest, the only thing to eat, though it didn't look eatable in the least, I saw in their possession was a few lumps of some stuff like half-cooked dough of a dirty lavender color they kept wrapped in leaves and now and then swallowed a piece of, but so small that it seemed done more for the looks of the thing than for any serious purpose of sustenance. Why, in the name of all the gnawing devils of hunger, they didn't go for us? They were 30 to 5 and have a good tuck-in for once amazes me now when I think of it. We were outnumbered. They could have killed us and eaten us. They were big, powerful men with not much capacity to weigh the consequences, with courage, with strength even yet, though their skins were no longer glossy and their muscles no longer hard. And I saw that something restraining, one of those human secrets that baffle probability, had come into play there. I looked at them with a swift quickening of interest, not because it occurred to me I might be eaten by them before very long, though I own to you that just then I perceived in a new light, as it were, how unwholesome the pilgrims looked. And I hoped, yes, I positively hoped that my aspect was not so, what shall I say, so unappetizing? That's hilarious, by the way. That's hilarious. Marlowe's sitting here wondering why they don't eat them. And he looks at the other pilgrims and he's like, oh, okay, that's why. I hope I don't look like those guys. I positively hope that my aspect was not so, what shall I say, so unappetizing. A touch of fantastic vanity, which fitted well with the dream sensation that pervaded all my days at that time. Perhaps I had a little fever, too. One can't live with one's finger everlastingly on one's pulse. I had often a little fever or a little touch of other things, the playful paw strokes of the wilderness, the preliminary trifling before the more serious onslaught, which came in due course, which is why I'm now jaundiced with my sunken cheeks. Yes, I looked at them as you would on any human being. I looked at the cannibals as you would on any human being, with a curiosity of their impulses, motives, capacities, weaknesses, when brought to the test of an inexorable physical necessity. Restraint. What possible restraint? Was it superstition, disgust, patience, fear, or some kind of primitive honor? No fear can stand up to hunger. No patience can wear it out. Disgust simply does not exist where hunger is. And as to superstition, beliefs, and what you may call principles, they are less than chaff in a breeze. Don't you know the devilry of lingering starvation, its exasperating torment, its black thoughts, its somber and brooding ferocity? Well, I do. It takes a man all his inborn strength to fight hunger properly. It's really easier to face bereavement, dishonor, and the perdition of one's soul than this kind of prolonged hunger. Sad, but true. And these chaps, too, had no earthly reason for any kind of scruple. Restraint. I would just as soon have expected restraint from a hyena prowling amongst the corpses of a battlefield. But there was that fact facing me. The fact dazzling to be seen like the foam on the depths of the sea, like a ripple on an unfathomable enigma, a mystery greater when I thought of it than the curious, inexplicable note of desperate grief in the savage clamor that had swept by us on the riverbank, behind the blind whiteness of the fog. Why are the cannibals important?
Like what's stopping him from just, like what, he's like starting to question, I think, that a little bit. He's like, well, they're not just like these hyenas walking around. Like what's going on here that they're not attacking them?
Yeah, so there's something, there is a predisposition, there is a prejudice that Europeans have about natives in Africa. And it's being challenged by what he is observing. This is not what I expected. Why are they not savage? Why are they human beings? This is outrageous. Not that it's outrageous. So there's some real struggle happening here. There's a lot of okay. There's a lot of Marlowe struggling. Because we can go backwards as well. And take a look at, page 42. They're traveling the river, and there's a lot going on. Actually, we'll go to 41. 41. Going up that river was like traveling back to the earliest beginnings of the world, when vegetation rioted on the earth and the big trees were kings. An empty stream, a great silence, an impenetrable forest. Geography matters. Who are our characters? Fairy tale characters, Hansel D and Gretel Dumb. What happens to them in the forest? What frequently happens to children in fairy tales in the forest? Yeah.
They get lured in by like a witch or something.
Yeah, so there's a luring that happens, and prior to that, there's something else that probably goes on. Nicole? Certainly there is a loss of innocence, yes, but they get lost. They get lost. You get lost in the forest. An empty stream, a great silence, an impenetrable forest. Don't forget, river. What does a river represent? Is that a symbol? River represents what? Life. The air was warm, thick, heavy, sluggish. There was no joy in the brilliance of sunshine. The long stretches of the waterway ran on, deserted into the gloom of overshadowed distances. On silvery sandbanks, hippos and alligators sunned themselves side by side. Don't go for a swim. The broadening waters flowed through a mob of wooded islands. You lost your way on that river as you would in a desert and butted all day long against shoals, trying to find the channel, till you thought yourself bewitched and cut off forever from everything you had known once, somewhere far away in another existence, perhaps. What do we do when we find ourselves in that position? We find ourselves in a position like in Nikki Giovanni's Choices, or Emily Dickinson's We Grow Accustomed to the Dark. Do we get lost in life? Do we get lost in life by surprises? I think back to the beginning of the school year, and my daughter, on the day that we were supposed to drop her off, the day that we were taking her to school, she learned she was not going to have a roommate after all. And then like half of her classes went online and virtual. And they couldn't have guests in their rooms, and they couldn't eat in the dining hall. So there's a tremendous amount of loneliness, of isolation. There's a sense of getting lost. What am I supposed to do now? Now what? Surprise! There were moments when one's past came back to one, as it will sometimes when you have not a moment to spare to yourself. You start thinking about other traumas in your life. No, now is not a good time. I would like that to go away, please. But it came in the shape of an unrestful and noisy dream, remembered with wonder amongst the overwhelming realities of this strange world of plants and water and silence. So all that silence and the stillness of life did not in the least resemble a peace. It was the stillness of an implacable force brooding over an inscrutable intention. It looked at you with a vengeful aspect. I got used to it afterwards. I did not see it anymore. I had no time. I had to keep guessing at the channel. I had to discern, mostly by inspiration, the signs of hidden banks. I watched for sunken stones. I was learning to clap my teeth smartly before my heart flew out, when I shaved by a fluke some infernal sly old snag that would have ripped the life out of the tin pot steamboat and drowned all the pilgrims. I had to keep a lookout for the signs of dead wood we could cut up in the night for next day's steaming. When you have to attend to things of that sort, when you've got to make your list so that you can cross items off of your list, and you focus on those sorts of things, that is what gets you through. To the mere incidence of the surface, the reality, I tell you, fades. The stress of all the other stuff, it fades. It's still there, but it fades. The inner truth is hidden, luckily, but I felt it all the same. You still feel it. I felt often its mysterious stillness watching me at my monkey tricks, just as it watches you fellows performing on your respective tightropes for, what is it, half a crown a tumble? Try to be civil, Marlowe. I beg your pardon. So we all put on a show. Again, an administrator walks in the room, I'm putting on my monkey show. Dance, monkey, dance. What are the times that you have to perform your monkey tricks? So all of this being on the river, I propose to you, is a message for us on how we go about living our lives. And so this end bit, when they're in the fog, is that a symbol? More than just rain or snow. When you're in the fog, what's going on? Yeah, it's the absolute worst. I had a very scary time one night with my wife. We were bowling for like a school event for her. And we had to come all the way from St. Joe to Niles. And there were bridges that we needed to cross. But that fog was so dense. There was no telling. We couldn't even see the street lamp that marked the turn that would lead us to our home. It is scary and terrifying. And then to have people shooting at you through that whole process. And we'll get at an explanation for that, but we've got to read a little bit more. The page 49, in the dense fog, they're not threatening to eat Marlowe. Where is it that they say, catch him, give him to us, eh? Page, oh, there it is, very bottom. So they're talking about, the potential of being attacked. There's concern. About the middle of that last paragraph on 49, the whites, of course, greatly discomposed, had besides a curious look of being painfully shocked by such an outrageous row. The others had an alert, naturally interested expression, but their faces were essentially quiet. Even those of the one or two who grinned as they hauled at the chain. Several exchanged short, grunting phrases, which seemed to settle the matter to their satisfaction. Their headman, a young, broad-chested black, severely draped in dark blue fringed cloths, with fierce nostrils and his hair all done up artfully in oily ringlets, stood near me. Aha, I said, just for good fellowship's sake. Catch him, he snapped, with a bloodshot widening of his eyes and a flash of sharp teeth. Catch him, give him to us. To you, eh? I asked. What would you do with him? Eat him, he said, curtly, and leaning his elbow on the rail, looked out into the fog in a dignified and profoundly pensive attitude. We'd eat him because we're hungry. You guys aren't doing a good job of feeding us. And then, I think this is the last question. Page 57. The question is, why did Marlowe leave the man to die? And it's not that Marlowe leaves the man to die. It's that there's nothing that Marlowe can do for the man who does die. And then we have this assumption that Mr. Kurtz is dead. It's not that they think that Mr. Kurtz is dead. It is that Marlowe thinks that Mr. Kurtz is dead. And Marlowe thinks that Mr. Kurtz is dead because that's how our minds work. That's how our teeny tiny little Neanderthal brains work sometimes. That just when we think that, we've gotten through something, we think it's all for naught. Well, that was useless. So his assumption is that Mr. Kurtz is dead. Do you have new questions about the old reading? Yeah.
Is it assumed that Mr. Kurtz is the one that had the writing that's in like with the wood, or is that just someone before that?
So there's uncertainty. There's a lot of they're not clear. Yeah, they don't know, but they're curious. Who would know that we're coming? And yeah, other questions. All right, we've only got about 11 minutes left. There are some things that I'm offering for you to look at here. Alternatively, you can go ahead and just start reading the next chunk. All right?